Hi, everyone, and welcome back to today's show with myself, Faustina Anyanwu, on Tough Talk. And as you will expect, today we are talking about racism, gang, and police brutality. In the wake of George Floyd's death, brutal murder by the police in America, in the United States of America, it's a topic that everybody is keen in. And looking at it from the UK point of view, so today we are going to focus on how does the UK, fit in all these discussions and all the campaigns going on. And I'll be discussing all of this today with my guest, Marilyn Devonish, who is a neuro success coach, a change management consultant, and also a social commentator, among many other specialties that she has. Welcome, Marilyn, on the show.
Thank you, Faustina. Really delighted to be here. Now, it's called Tough Talk, so I'm looking forward to your questions. I've got no idea what you're going to be asking, but I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to have you. Now, going straight into the topic of today, like I mentioned, the brutality is going on, the police brutality, Black Lives Matter, and all of what is happening in the United States of America. Now, as for you, as someone who lives in the UK, how would you compare the level of racism here with what we are seeing in the United States of America?
I always say thankfully and not thankfully. It's a double-edged sword. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Over here, thankfully, we don't have the kind of the out and out violence that they have here. People are not walking around packing a piece and carrying a gun. Really grateful for that. And we don't have the, I don't know if you saw the story that broke a couple of weeks ago where they've found two black men hanging from trees. If you know the song Strange Fruit, you will know the implications of that. They're saying it's suicide. The families are saying absolutely no way. So we don't have that sort of thing going on here in the United Kingdom. I would say what we do have, which is a bit more insidious and much more challenging to pinpoint, is what I'd call it's more covert here in the United Kingdom rather than overt and in your face, if that makes sense. So I'd say It still goes on. Don't let's, as Tyra Banks would say, don't get it twisted. And it just operates differently.
Now, when you say, I understand the fact of covert and overt now, but when it comes to the implication of it, the whichever one, whether it's the violence in your face one in the US or whether it's the one that is so much covert that sometimes you don't even know that it's happening, which one is affecting people more in terms of long term?
I would say the one that triggers us more, of course, when you watch George Floyd for those 8 minutes and 20 something seconds, that triggers you. I was saying to someone that I was speaking to a couple of days ago, the weird thing about it is when I saw that, it transported me back to the 1980s when I first watched Roots, which was a TV series here in the United Kingdom, but it originated from the United States. It was painful to watch that, but everybody at school was watching it. So I watched it because you don't want to be left out of the conversation. And it was actually my sister I was talking to, and I said, do you know what? I'm still kind of, in a weird way, scarred from that in terms of what I saw. There are particular scenes, even as I speak to you now, they're kind of playing in my mind. I remember what those scenes were. So when you watch what for me looks like and presents itself like a modern day lynching that the whole world saw, on your mobile phone, on your tablet, on your computer screen, I think then it triggers some of, and to say old wounds makes it, you can't really say that because it's like, it didn't happen to me. I was watching a TV show. However, it does something to your psyche in a way. And potentially then, when you see something like that, even though it's not you, even if you just call it in terms of NLP, I'm an NLP trainer, there's a thing we call matching and mirroring. If you know anything about, let's say, the work of Bruce Lipton, where they talk about the mirror neurons, for example, when something happens to another person, and in day-to-day terms, we might call that empathy.
Yeah.
You see it, and you have a reaction to it. And then depending on what's in your past, and from my therapeutic work, what's in your timeline will then determine how that hits you.
Yeah. Now, someone will argue that, what is happening in the US, it happens and you see it and you react to it, and probably you think of how to deal with it. Now, in the UK here, you find out that it's difficult for you to pinpoint what is happening to you. Therefore, you don't really know what to do about it. And you can see that in the social disposition of Black people in this country compared to the Americans. Now, in America, you can easily see a Black millionaire. You can easily see a Black person owning businesses and being celebrated worldwide, and their talent and everything. They are still able to show their talent and leadership and get involved in the in the society and in the both leadership of almost every area. But here, even when there is, you can't really see it, especially if you live here. But you find that you constantly are living like your life is under a glass that you cannot breathe. You can't psychologically breathe. You can't psychologically move beyond where you are. And it can be frustrating.
Now, that's an interesting one, because many will say everyone has everything we need. It's laid out. There's nothing stopping you, nothing getting in your way. Stop moaning, get out there and do it. Create, make something, build something. I totally hear that. And I'm one of these people who like, you know what? Let's do this thing. And it wasn't always like that, but nowadays I see something and I think I'll give it a go. Let me give it a go, and then I'll put my all into it if it's something that I really want to do. I'm going to share with you a quote. There is a gentleman that some people, if you're watching, depending on your history and background, and if you happen to be from Barbados, what you call Bajan, you might recognize the name. My uncle, got goosebumps now, my uncle was a gentleman called Jeff Crawford. He was born in Barbados, but resided here till he passed away. He was on the very first police complaints authority in London when it was set up in the 1980s. I didn't really know what that meant. I'm a pre-teen teenager. I wasn't really that interested. All I know that Uncle Jeff was on television a lot, and I knew that it was something to do with policing the police. But that was as far as my kind of involvement went. If he was still alive, oh my goodness, I'd have that poor man on Zoom interviews and webinars every week. So a couple of years ago, for the last 3-4 years, I've been chairing the annual Independence Day debate at the Barbados High Commission. On one of those occasions, a colleague of Uncle Jeff, he was in the police force, Uncle Jeff was doing his thing. He rose through the ranks, had an MBE, has done everything, quintessentially correctly. I said to him, if Uncle Jeff were here today, now bear in mind, this was about 2-3 years ago. If Uncle Jeff were here today, what would he make, do you think, of the progress we have made? His response to me, which took my breath away, he says, look, many of us worked hard, progressed, did what we needed to do, and we broke through the glass ceiling only to find that it was reinforced with concrete. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks, because right there it's like, but on the face of it, he's really done well. But even at that position, he was aware that he would keep bumping up against something, which people would tell, a bit like you said earlier, when it's kind of covert, you don't know what, overt, you're clear, you know what's going on here. The covert stuff, you kind of go, oh, was that me? Maybe, oh, I wasn't good enough. Maybe, my presentation, my proposal, and you second guess yourself, and then you don't want to be the one who's always crying, oh, the race card, because that's a whole different conversation. But when he said that quote, I was like, oh my goodness, all these years after Uncle Jeff fought tooth and nail. It was my uncle who, because he used to, a lot of the people who came over from the Caribbean and the Windrush generation, they worked on London Underground in London Transport, and Uncle Jeff was one of the people who was instrumental in getting equal rights for those workers. But to think all of those years later, somebody would still be describing it like breaking through the glass ceiling and finding it's reinforced with concrete. That's a bit gutting.
Yeah. Now you see, I agree I agree to what you said, and my question now is: do you think many Black people understand this? That do they understand their situation in terms of um probably emotionally? We see how we see it happen in America. We react, so it gets to your emotion and you feel it, and perhaps some people might develop some kind of PTSD. But then, even here on its own, you might look at yourself, as human beings, we have ambitions. Sometimes we walk towards that ambition, but you find yourself going in the same cycle, not knowing what is happening to you. That in itself also can cause this level of PTSD and depression and issues with your psychology, psych, that you cannot pinpoint it. Do you think many Black people in this country realize what is happening to them?
That's an interesting one. In my therapeutic world, I would say no, not yet, waking up. Because when I started this 20 years ago, one of the things once I started learning about timeline and genealogy and how that can impact you and the mind-body connection and the importance of getting to the root cause, I had that light bulb moment 20 years ago. I was like, oh my goodness, I can see how things that have happened in my past, which didn't even involve me, I was not there, can then be almost carried through generationally. And so for years, I remember the first time I tried to explain it to a client, and I said, okay, I started talking about a gestalt. And a gestalt is a chain of events that are linked. And I could just see her blank over. I went, hold on, let me put it another way. I said, if you have a string of very expensive pearls and one of them breaks, not all of them fall to the floor. The reason you have to say very expensive pearls, if you just get a cheap string, they're not individually knotted, but with an expensive set of pearls, put one on, you knot it, you put one on, you knot it, you put one on, you knot it. And I said, your timeline, your genealogy is a bit like a string of pearls. Something can happen to a pearl right at the end, which can then reverberate through the line.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see then she's like, oh, she's got it. And I said, and some of that can predate you. And I talked to her about what was at that time my presupposition. This was 20 years ago, in the year 2000, 2001. About 3 years ago, I saw some studies start coming out where they were doing studies with lab rats, a bit like if anyone's heard of Pavlov's dogs, the cause and effect. So what they had with the lab rat, they got rat number 1, they shock it, apply some shock stimulus and give it a fright. So it's like a sound or they'll prod it or something like that. Great, that's the experiment. Rat number 1 has an offspring. So this is rat number 2 now. They apply the same stimulus, the same sound, whatever, but they didn't do the act, whatever it was. It had the same fear response to that sound without being prodded as well. Rat number 2 then has an offspring. So now we're third generation. Third generation just has to hear the sound and they get the same fear response, even though they haven't had the same stimulus. When I saw those stories come out about 3 years, I was like, okay, I've been saying that for, at that point, 17 years to explain to people how stuff can be carried in the psyche. And even if you don't want to go back and go, look, my ancestors, that has got nothing to do with me, you can pick things up from your parents, from your grandparents. You say to somebody, what causes you to say that? How do you believe that? Why do you think that way? And one of the things I say to my therapeutic clients is, who does that belong to? And they'll go, I don't know, what do you mean? Who does that thought, who does that belief belong to? And they go, oh, my mum always says that, my gran always says that, or it runs in the family. So even by osmosis, if we don't even want to look at the ancestral generational straight away, by osmosis, we can pick things up, we can almost ingrain them, make them our own, and we don't even realize that we've got them. And I think now the wider world is waking up to this conversation and recognizing that we can carry stuff which can then weigh heavily on our psyche, and those are the conversations that I'm seeing starting to emerge today.
Now, do you think now that you talk about conversation, oftentimes, like, okay, you said something about background and all that. For me, I didn't grow up here. I wasn't born in UK. I'm a first generation immigrant, and I will tell you the first thing I noticed when I came here was that unfriendliness. You know, perhaps people who are born here might not see it. But as soon as I came here, I'm from Nigeria. In Nigeria, we are very vibrant people. Nigerians are vibrant. Nigerians are celebratory. We are very loud, you know. So, but when I came here, I could feel that the space is not enough for me. You could feel it, but you don't know what it is. You can't touch it. And, you know, and I continue to observe because I'm somebody who observes a lot. I continue to observe, and I was feeling in me that with the amount of resources, let me put in quotes, resources and civilization that, you know, that are communicated from here, or that we are meant to believe about the UK and the Western world, like when I was in Africa, then the Black youths I'm seeing here are not performing as I would expect. Now, I'm trying to compare their performance with what myself and people like me who grew up in the village in Nigeria with oftentimes no electricity, no water, no. So I saw a lot of Black children roaming, and when you look at them, you see them with no ambition. You know, you can feel they don't have any focus, no ambition. So I began to wonder, is like there's something shutting down the conversation that is making people not to realize what is happening to them. What do you think?
My dad used to say, get your education, because otherwise you're going to be pigeonholed into sport. You know, running, football, da 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 da. And I remember once I used to like drawing. And my art teacher, and you could do, and back in my day, you could do these things called CSEs or GCEs. Now it's GCSEs. And the art teacher had said to me, I'll put you in for C. Now everybody wants an O level. If you've got to choose between a CSE and an O level, give me the O level. She then said, I'm not entering you for O-level art. I'm going to put you in for the CSE. I said, why? I've passed everything and done all the classes. It was like, no, I think you'll be better with the CSE. So I just happened to mention this to my dad. Oh, he went down the school and had a word with her. And my dad was very polite, very friendly, very smiley. Actually, on the face of it, if you saw him, you might think he was Nigerian, you know, in terms of his demeanor. Oh, and big laugh. You always knew when he was in the room, you could hear that roaring laughter. But he went down to school and had a word with her. And all I knew is the next day I went in and she's like, oh, you'll be doing the O-level art. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. But my dad, because he is aware of this thing that you could get pigeonholed and put down a particular path. One of my favorite stories is an experiment they did, and they actually did it out in the United States, but they may have replicated it here as well, where they gave a teacher a class of children, and they either said to the teacher, these are the worst children in the school, good luck, they're not going to amount to nothing. Other teacher was told, these are our best and our brightest, but it was the other way around. The ones that the no-hoper children were the brightest, the best and the brightest were the no-hoper group. You know what happened? The no-hoper group, where the teacher thought they were the best and the brightest, were the best and the brightest. Their grades went up, they were passing their exams, they were much happier in their demeanor and whatever. They overtook everyone. And those who the teacher was told, these are the no-hopers, they did very badly. And if any of you have seen that Jane Elliott video back in the day, and I've reshared it, the blue eyes, the brown eyes, she does a very similar experiment just on eye color, which that's a whole different story. But what it tells me is who you are being taught by, first of all, and don't get it wrong, it's not just about the school system, it's also about your home environment, but who you're being taught by and the expectations that they hold for you is in some way going to determine what you believe you are capable of and what you strive to. Now that's a massive generalization because everyone is an individual. But when I'm teaching the faux reading and accelerated learning, I talk about the Bandura curve. The Bandura curve says you will rise up or down to meet your level of expectation. So if your expectation is here, even when you're on the learning curve and doing this, eventually your level of performance is going to come here and probably exceed it. If your expectation for yourself is low, you can be doing the learning curve and actually you could do really well. But what you're going to do, you're going to downplay that as a fluke, a one-off, a weird anomaly. And so one of the things I think, if people are in a system where they can see and feel and know that that system has no high expectation for them, your natural psyche then goes, oh, well, what's the point? And that can bring in that sense of hopelessness.
Do you think that is why we have a lot of affiliation with gangs? A lot of Black children, joining gangs and doing gangs and, killing each other.
For me, gangs is a universal thing. There are all kinds of gangs. When I was growing up, it was the skinheads a lot. They were the very visible gangs. Now, you got the hoodies, etc. One of the things I'm going to say about gangs can give you a sense of belonging. They can give you a sense of brotherhood. They can give you a sense of sisterhood, and they can give you a sense of support where you don't have anything going on at home. Because I know when I've done work with gangs, and number one, just this, when they all come as a collective, sometimes it can feel a little bit intimidating. And even in their, very standoffish when you first meet them, like some of the projects I was either brought in to be the mentor or the coach, etc. Or on some of the, depending on what I'm doing, I'm managing the project that they are now part of. And there's that standoffishness. You're a bit suspicious. What's going on here? What do you want from me? What's all this about? I'm telling you, when I sat down and I spoke to them, often one-to-one at first, because none of them want to be the one to be opening up and talking in front of everyone. You've got to keep front, you've got to keep face. But gradually, as we got to know each other, and then those conversations would happen in the open group, but in the one-to-one mentoring sessions and in the one-to-one coaching sessions, they were bright beyond belief.
Yeah.
Creative, intelligent. And it wasn't always, I've got X number of O levels, A levels, degree intelligent. I mean, the street smarts and the creativity and the strategic thinking. One of the jokes, I used to say to them, look, if you lot could just take those street smarts and channel it into whatever you want to do in terms of your life and creating a business, you just blow everyone out of the water. So I think and often talking to, when I talked about the camaraderie and that sense of support, I think it's one of the reasons, not all of the reasons, people also want to serve their country, but I think it's one of the reasons people might join the army as well, to get that sense of a place where you fit in and you belong. But talking to them, some of them, in terms of what was going on in their environment, was so traumatic that their friends, the gangs, were the person who got them, who understood them, and that is the place where they could fit in. And I think that, I'm sure if I'm sat down with white gang members, Hispanic gang members, Black gang members, and we have those kinds of conversations, I'm probably going to hear a similar rhetoric and a similar reasoning for that. And of course, there's the other side of it where there's, more bravery, more bravado when you are together with your crew, with your clan. So I know that's the side of it as well, where you may do things that you wouldn't necessarily do on your own, because now you've got the power of the collective and you're one unit, as opposed to you're an individual, I could single you out. But I really think there's that sense that sometimes that is one of the places where people get that sense of fitting in and get that sense of belonging. And yes, it can spiral into other things, but sitting down, the way I described it on one of the projects I was on, where I was bringing two warring gangs together to set up a community radio station. They didn't know they were going to have to work together at the beginning. I said to one of the other people on the project, I said, from what I've just experienced, sitting in that room, listening to them and hearing their creative ideas, I said, this is a lost generation. And I don't mean they were lost, but they were. But I mean, there's almost been a gap where they've been forgotten about and overlooked and underestimated. And if you haven't then got that drive and that push always, you'll just go, whatever, I might as well live down to the expectation you hold of me.
Now, do you think do you think that the white, society and the system, do you think they realize the amount of value they are losing by continuing to perpetuate racism and stopping the Black creativity?
One of the for me personally, one of the fundamental problems and roots of racism is that the Black race had all of those hundreds of years ago been portrayed as something that had no value. If you think back to, I mean, I wasn't around in those days, but when the Windrush generation came in the 50s and 60s, a lot of the signs that were up, no Irish, no dogs, no Blacks. So you are pretty much less than a dog. When that is the way, and again, it's just one of those things that can be in the psyche by the way that you're portrayed in the media. You know, I was a fan of Starsky and Hutch when I was growing up. Huggy Bear, if any of you know that program, you may not, if you may never have watched it, but I'm sure it'll be on YouTube. Have a look. It's, it's cool. It's a police show. The Black guy he wasn't the lead. You got the two lead actors, but Huggy Bear was a main recurring character. But his character was the traditional pimp, the wide brim hat, sunglasses, all of the gold, the coat on the shoulders, the big flares, the stepping. It's stereotypical. And Huggy Bear was always on the make, always doing something illegal, underhand, but just on the right side of the law. When you have that portrayal that people are less than, then you don't see their value. So if an opportunity comes to do something, to step up, take a role, etc., you're going to look at what you perceive to be your most valuable resources, and they're not Black. So I don't think people even realize. I did another interview last week, and I just shared some of the instances I've had in the corporate world where I got to see behind the curtain in terms of what was going on in relation to me. And when I shared those examples, people nearly fell off their chair and are like, are you kidding? Oh my gosh, really? But I think it's so ingrained sometimes that people don't notice. So they actually don't even recognize the value that they've got because they have a stereotypical idea, generally speaking, of what you can do, what you're capable, and actually where you belong or where they think you belong.
Now, even with slavery and all the subjugations and things that Black people went through, especially in the US, we have a history shows us that majority of the essential things that we use now were actually, found by Black people, even when they were still slaves. Now, how would anyone reconcile these stereotypes with the reality of what Black people can do?
The brain, the mind, is a beautiful and fascinating mechanism. It's both simplistic sometimes and very complicated. And it's that whole thing, people often talk about the bias, the unconscious bias. There'll be times if you have run the way actually I've got one here. I use this when I'm teaching the photo reading accelerated learning, but I'm saying to people, if you've run a neurological pathway enough times, it's just a habit. It just gets ingrained. It is in your psyche. You don't know any different. Now, in the world we live in today, you've got media, you've got things going on around you. So now we come down to what I would call willful ignorance, where the information actually to help you change your mind is there, but you now have to make a choice and a decision to look at the evidence, let's put it that way. But even if it was still a long time ago, the upset at the Olympics when Hitler was there and the black man won, because that just went against everything he'd been telling the world in terms of inferior and all of it. Now it's like, hot damn, what just happened here? So, but sometimes even in the face of all of the evidence, you can still discount it. You can still explain it away and even not see it. And somebody can come and point it out to you And you can still go, this is what you hear most often. You know it's coming when you hear yes, but. When somebody says yes, but, they've sort of half vaguely heard what you said, but now they're going to make a rebuttal and bat out whatever you've just said and bring their own example in. And I think it's so deeply ingrained sometimes that even when it's right in front of your face, you still can't see it. And sometimes you can almost see people glaze over, but that's, you know, I know we have the big debate sometimes about Black History Month but that what you're describing, somebody had put out many years ago, the inventions that were created by Black people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, pretty much all of the things that we rely on today, like even that film Hidden Figures, oh my goodness, I watched that with my white friend, both of us. So she sat on her sofa, I'm sat on my sofa. We're together at Christmas of one year, and we're both sat like this, and I could see her in my peripheral vision, she could see me, and at the exact same moment we just burst into tears for different reasons. And one of them for me was, I am so pleased that she was alive to see the world recognize her contribution to getting man to the moon, because many people die without having any recognition whatsoever. But it was also oh my goodness, just imagine what it must be like to have all that skill, all that knowledge, all that talent, and still have people overlook you and not see any of it because their psyche just won't allow them. They don't want to go into the place of cognitive dissonance where it messes with your head. So it's easier just to deny its existence altogether.
There's a long list of I saw this, someone was making this reference on social media. I'm not sure whether it was Facebook, LinkedIn, but somebody wrote something and saying that the long list of if that Black people have to face, if Black people, if the Black guy did this, if the Black guy, if now what could we have done to make do Black people need to prove themselves?
Sadly, I think you still do. I know.
And how do you do that? How do you prove yourself?
For me, I hear the phrase in my head is, you just got to keep on keeping on. You know, you just got to keep going. You just got to keep going. And even when I just share one or two snippets of things that have happened to me, people are like, oh my God, that would have been enough just to floor me right there. I'm done. I'm out. Why? So I think as a race, we have a sense of resilience because we've almost got no choice. You're either going to crumble and die, or you just got to keep going. You've just got going. And I know many of the households would have had the conversations with their children that if you're Black, you're going to have to work 2 times harder, 5 times harder, 10 times harder, just to, not because you're 5, 10 times worse, but just to have what you've done at least marginally recognized, even if it's exceptional, even if it's amazing. So part of it, I can now hear Flavor Flav, don't believe the hype. Part of it is you've got to, on some level, try not to buy into the hype of that, because once that seeps into your psyche, it's possibly game over, where again now you just can't be bothered. So part of it, you just got to keep going. You've got to believe in what you're doing and power forward. Where you see these things, highlight them, point them out, challenge them, see if you can start effecting some kind of change. But I think it's our sense of resilience that actually does keep us going and keeps us moving. And on the flip side of resilience is also recognizing that you are human and you are allowed to have feelings and emotions, because that's one of the things that, generally speaking, Black men particularly, and even men in general, you know, big boys don't cry, you know, man up, all those sorts of things and now you've got to be the strong one, you've got to be the protector, you've got to be the provider, so you've got to hold it down and hold it all together. And I think now the thing is making sure that doesn't turn itself inwards, because that's a whole different spiral. But I think sometimes we've just got, well, we know we always have to keep picking ourselves up and carrying on despite and in spite of what might be going on around us.
On personally, you know, again, my background is completely different from anyone who is born in the UK or, you know, born in the Western world. I was born in Nigeria. And in every society, there's always discrimination. There's always, in fact, every human being, you know, always have their biases, whether it has to do with women or like in my culture. From the time when we grew up, I got to learn also that the culture I'm going to talk about now wasn't our, you know, original culture. They all started during the time of colonization and all that, but that's the culture I knew and grew up in. So the culture of where women are seen as less, you know, you are being prepared to be a good wife. So you are made to always aspire. Your aspiration is to what you can do so that you can get a good husband and be a good wife and, you know, those kind of things. And apart from that as well, we have this thing in Nigeria. Nigeria has a lot of different cultures and different types of people. So like myself, I'm from the Igbo tribe, and then I don't like to use the word tribe, but I'm from the Igbo nation or whatever. So, and there are the Yorubas and there are the Hausas and stuff. So, and you know, these things, these different cultures play a lot of parts depending on where you are. Like if you're in Lagos, if you are looking for something important and you come into the office and you're not able to speak Yoruba, most likely, you know, you are going to have to struggle to get that. So, but it wasn't as much as it is with racism here. Now, what I'm trying to say is, for me, like when I came here, I used to be like, so if people hate you this much, why is it that Black people are finding it difficult to band together, come together and build themselves up? My experience as an entrepreneur and as somebody who, first of all, why we started the media magazine and, you know, trying to do this thing was I used to see a lot of times the language that is used for Black people, the representation in the media, the coverage, you know, I didn't want, it wasn't encouraging me, it wasn't empowering me. And I don't want my children growing up and having to face that. So I wanted to create something where they can see the work that we do. They can see a different picture of who we are. Now, you know, and within this time, I've had the most resentment for my people, the people I want to represent, you know, and it eludes me. And I used to be like, okay, now these people complain too much about racism. Mind you, I didn't understand what it was all about. I thought it was all this casual racism on the street and stuff like that, and you can still move on. Now, but my question is, why is it with the level of hatred, subjugation, and why is it hard for us to come together? Why is it hard for us to take pride in anything that is of our own?
Now that's an interesting one. And as you're talking, I was thinking of the movie Django Unchained with, I believe it was Samuel L. Jackson was in the role, the character that I'm thinking of. He was the house slave. Now, when you're in the house, you don't want anyone else in, because that's a coveted position right there. You know, you get to be inside in the warm, and you kind of almost can delude yourself that you're kind of family. And I remember years ago, there was a TV presenter, and she was one of the first Black TV presenters to have quite a prominent role on a prominent show. And many years after that show finished airing, I was at a talk at the Royal Bank of Scotland, and she was the guest speaker. And she was encouraging us, as you know, it was one for Black entrepreneurs. She was encouraging us to work together. And she shared her theory of why we don't. She explained it slightly differently, but it was exactly the theory I had as well, that when it's been ingrained into you, there's only room for one. Like if you think about models, Naomi Campbell, Tyra Banks. If Naomi Campbell was walking a show, there was no room for Tyra. If Tyra Banks was walking a show, there was no room for Naomi, because you could only, it's a bit like the Highlander, they say you could have only one. And so that's been again, we're talking about this genealogical thing, this unspoken idea. There's not room for many of you. Or, you know, one of the clothing brands, they jumped on the Black Lives Matter bandwagon last week. Oh my goodness, the Twitter thread was hot in terms of them being ripped to shreds, because somebody went back through all of their shows and went back 5 years, and in 5 years worth of fashion shows, only two of those shows featured black models. So it's still the same unspoken idea. There's only room for one or two of you. So now, the way that she described it when I was at Royal Bank of Scotland, she said it's like crabs in a barrel. One crab tries to get out and the others go, where do you think you're going? And they go to pull you back in. Sometimes also, because people realize the potential harshness of this world, they will discourage you from doing something. It seems like they're getting in your way. In their mind, they're worried for you. They don't want you to go through the disappointment. They don't want you to go through the failure. And that's why sometimes they will just want to encourage, just get a proper job, just get a settled job, doesn't matter what it is, just one that pays the rent every month, and forget about all this ambition, because they recognize they've lived it. It can, not always, but it can be really, really hard. So if somewhere that belief that there's only room for a couple of us is ingrained within our psyche, something can kick in and go, well, if they get ahead, if he gets ahead, if she gets ahead, that means I can't. And therefore now you can't even wholeheartedly give them your support, because there's that little bit of, they've got my spot. Because the world has been constructed that there are a limited number of spots for black faces.
Now, bringing you back to the discussions right now, you know, in terms of Black Lives Matter, and George Floyd and the movement and campaign going on now. Today, the UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, you know, was, you know, interviewed, and I'm going to quote, though I'll remove some part of the quote. He says that, you know, this taking a knee thing feels to me like a symbol of subjugation and subordination. How do you react to that?
You know what? I'm gonna have to see the whole quote. But the reason I'm like, what really, oh man, I have to just take my hat off to the people on social media who create these memes, you know, the jokes that go around. I'm like, I take my hat off to you. Somebody put a side-by-side of Kaepernick and the man who was kneeling on George Floyd's neck. And they said, we tried to do this, it's come to this, or words to that effect. The outcry when he took a knee at that game, you would think he'd rip somebody's head off and eaten a live animal on camera. You know, if you hadn't seen the headline and you didn't know what happened, you just saw the reaction to it. It was brutal. And it was peaceful protest. The other end of the scale of what we're seeing now, with the some of the riots and all the marching, etc., it's like you almost can't win. If you do the peaceful protest, you're ripped to shreds, you lose your job, you lose your livelihood, you lose your career. If you do the other way, you're a hooligan and you're a this and you're a thug and you're a that. So now it's almost like you're in a rock and a hard place. What are you going to do? And I think one of the things, you know, I remember what he said at the time, and I was reading something recently where he said, I took a knee not to disrespect the troops, not to disrespect the police, just to send a symbol for what people are now calling the bad apples. So it's almost like no matter what you do, it's like you can't win. But if the world had taken notice of when he first took a knee at that game, I'm not saying what's happened now wouldn't have happened, However, everybody's waking up very late to that party because he'd done his best to highlight these ideas in a way that he felt he could do it, which was a very peaceful thing to do, is taking a knee, and all hell broke loose as we saw. So I'm like, it's a rock and a hard place, you know, in some respects.
Yeah. Now, why do you think this particular George Floyd death, has reverberated throughout the world, throughout cultures, throughout even races. Even when you see, some of the videos that I was watching, I saw more, the amount of white people who were campaigning. I could compare it with when Barack Obama came on the show, like when he showed up to, campaigning as a for president. Um, you know, this particular one, I've seen a lot of white people championing the campaign, leading the campaign, both in the US here and other parts of Europe and other places. What do you think happened? Why is that? What happened differently this time?
When I watched what happened to George Floyd, I immediately said to myself, if I said it on social media, I would have been able to do a screen grab and show it to you. But I just said to myself, I said, this is going to be different. I didn't know what I meant in that moment. I just said, this is going to be different. And then, now there's a group that you and I are both in. We won't say what the group is, but you know what that is. I went to that group and I said, I really think we need to highlight this from a UK point of view, because even though it's in America, I believe it's going to reverberate here and be a global story. None of them really took any notice. A couple of weeks later, we see it go global. I'm telling you, when the Amish came out with their signs, I've never seen the Amish leave their compound for anything or anyone, apart from a reality TV show where some of the teenagers went to New York or LA, whenever it was, and did a reality TV swap. But aside from that, I've never seen them come out in support of anything that isn't to do with their culture. When they came out, I'm like, all right, it's totally global. And 6 years ago, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 6 years ago, I wrote a blog entitled, I Can't Breathe, the Racial Evolution That Needs to Be Heard. So when I saw those words trending a few weeks ago, I was like, is it the anniversary of Trayvon Martin? I don't think so. I was a little bit confused. And then I realized it was a brand new story. And that's when I was like, whoa, this is going to be different. One of the things I said in that blog 6 years ago, and something I've been saying for the last 20 odd years, is that I think it goes in stages. That's why I use the word evolution. You have a first wave of something, and then that's all that the world or that particular society can handle in that moment. You can't take any more. So I was in the blog, I said, look, it got to a point where, okay, we're going to get a black girl into the school, but she, and she's actually 65 now. She's still alive. It's in our lifetime. And then that's all you can handle, though. And then it's like, okay, we'll let you have a bit of land and a job. But that's all that they could handle. Now it's like, sorry, what? You want to date and procreate? And it was a loving day I think it was last Thursday or Friday. It was a case in America where the first interracial couple, they changed the law so you could choose to marry someone from another race. You didn't have to, seek regress from the courts, etc. Now, okay, you're going to procreate, but that's all that they could handle. Now the next wave comes on. I'm sorry, what? You want what they call a white collar job? You want a management role? Okay, then. But now that's all you can handle. And it goes in waves. It goes in waves. If you'd said 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, a black man running for president, everybody would have fallen about laughing and go, yeah, only maybe a Hollywood movie. And then even you're stretching it, probably not going to be a blockbuster. But then we got to the stage where the world could handle Barack Obama being president of one of the largest nations in the free world. And then it goes again.
The so-called free world.
I
wouldn't call it a free word.
Was so cool. No, you're absolutely right. But I think these things go in waves and they go in stages, and it gets to a point. The way I described it in the blog, I said it's like having a boil. If you don't get to the root cause, it's going to keep coming back. It's going to keep festering. You need to lance that thing, which is painful. So there's going to be all hell breaks loose, and it's very messy, and you need to clean it out once and for all. And the thing I was saying, I don't think we've properly exercised the ghost, the spectre of racism. It has not been properly acknowledged in the world, which again is one of the reasons why it's festering. But I think what was different this time, everyone hit a tipping point. We've seen this over and over and over and over again, to the point you can actually be a little bit desensitized to the whole thing. Oh, again, oh, another one. And seriously, I wrote a post. I had George Floyd in my mind. It was 2 days after it happened. I wrote the post, but I said Armand Aubrey, and then I hit send. And then a few minutes later, I went, oh my God, I've used the wrong name. And I went back and I changed it. But I was like, oh, Marilyn, hold on a minute. You've got to give yourself a little bit of leeway, because the reason you use the wrong name, there have been so many, I'm losing track. You know, so it was just like, there've been so many. But I think it hits. There was a game when I was growing up called Buckaroo. It's a plastic horse. It's on a spring jack. And what happens is the horse sits flat, and then you have to put things on its saddle, like a bucket and a spade and a shoe and then the person who puts on the thing that makes it tip and knock everything off, you've lost the game, basically. I think this is like Buckaroo, that you can take so much, 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 you can get desensitized, you can go, oh, that's terrible, oh, that's shocking, but you know, oh, it's just another one. But at some point, bang, you hit the next wave of evolution. And I think, from my perspective, we've hit the next wave of evolution where bang, everything pops again, and it's like, whoa, we need to do better.
Okay. You know,
I know it's a big topic.
You know, it's a whole lot of discussion to face. Myself, I've not been able to. I have seen the video of the death of George Floyd, but I've not had the courage to listen to the sound of it, because I know what it's going to do to me. I say this because when perhaps it was Trayvon Martin's phone was the first one I really witnessed when I was here. And then I think I've had my daughter that time, and that hit me so deeply. The pain was as if I knew Trayvon Martin personally. And also maybe because he was almost the same age as my younger brother. So it was so personal for me that I cried for days, and I wrote a poem, for him. Okay. Now, my next question is this. Where do you think this present campaign will lead the movement to? How far will it get to? Well, how far will it go to making a substantial change?
Now, there's a list that I've seen being shared around social media of all of the things that have happened already as a result of George Floyd. And I don't know if you saw the footage of his daughter. She was at the march a couple of weeks ago. She was up on someone's head, like he's carrying her. And she said, my daddy is changing the world. My daddy is changing the world. So there's a lot that has already happened as a result of that. And I think this is now what I call, this is the point. I think we've got another week or two, and then we hit the point of what I call where the rubber hits the road. And we're back to that resilience thing. We're back to that sustainability thing. Black people, we're used to that already. But if you've joined the fight, and you've lent your voice to this campaign, because we've seen people from all races joining up. Like you said, a lot of the people who are out on the streets and campaigning are white, which is absolutely amazing, because almost for the first time they're waking up and they're starting to get it. And people are actually, I've seen a lot of my Black friends, I've known these people for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Some of them are speaking out for the very first time about the racist things that have happened to them as children, growing up, in their work, when they've had mixed race partners, all this sort of thing. So it's changing now, and I think where we go next and what's going to happen next in terms of how the world changes, it's going to be down to our level of resilience and our ability to keep going and not let things slide, not think, because sometimes something can happen. Like, I think when Barack Obama got in, pretty much the world sort of said to itself, oh, it's all right now, black man's president, so everything, racism must be over. And it's like, no. And he was, anyway, that's a whole nother story in terms of the politics and the level of support he got and didn't get. But I actually think now where it goes is going to be down to us as human beings in terms of what do we have the stomach, and when I say we, I mean collectively, but what do people have the stomach for? Because there are going to be parts of this fight, and it shouldn't be a fight after all of these years, but they're going to be part of these parts that can take it out of you. People are already saying they're tired, they're exhausted, they feel heavy, they feel drained, they feel emotional, they feel fear, they feel sadness, the whole range of emotions. People are running the gamut of this every time something lands in front of them on social media. And you're going to have to find a way to live with that, through that, and still carry on to continue to campaign for equality and social justice.
But I have two major questions more that I came in. One is I was discussing with a friend, a business business partner, associate, more like. So, and I was telling her, I said to her, I have a feeling that this sort of revolution, yes, is achieving certain things now, but there's going to be a pushback. So I told her that we are going to witness more police brutality in the shortest time. We're going to see so many more deaths in the hands of the police. We're going to see unnecessary arrest and death and provocation from the police. So, and I was saying this to her as kind of an advice because she lives in the US. So I was telling her to be vigilant, that everybody needs to be more vigilant and be more careful and watch where they are going. I don't know why I said that. And after we discussed the following them, I'm almost a bit emotional, I'm sorry. A few days later, I began to see somebody was hanging on that tree, somebody on that tree, and there's this girl. I took notice of her because her name was a Nigerian name. I said, what's going on? And I found them, they also found her, she was raped and killed. And then, initially she was being looked for. People say she was missing. Then we saw an update on her Twitter that she had been raped, describing who raped her and all that. So, and so when you look at what that description and all that, for me, many people were not picking it. But when I looked at it forensically, I was like, this sort of description, somebody going through this kind of situation will not be writing this. So I was looking at it as a kind of a way of cover up. I don't know, but that's what my mind told me at that point. Now, my point I'm putting to you is, what do you think based on what I'm saying? Like, do you think there's going to be a smooth revolution taking us to where we're going?
I don't even know. Sorry, I've just started laughing straight away. I'm like, I don't even know if it's possible to have the word smooth and revolution in the same sentence. I'm like, oh, that would be a miracle. That would be a miracle. And I don't know what it is about the human condition. From my observation thus far, it seems like for us humans to evolve, to grow, to develop, it's like we go through, it's sort of like we create drama. I don't know if it has to be that way. And if we can have a smooth revolution and evolution, but it seems that it always comes with the messiness and the fighting, etc. Now, it's interesting. I was watching Trevor Noah, who hosts a show out in the United States and does as far as I'm concerned. When he took over from Jon Stewart, I'm like, I really like Jon Stewart. I'm not sure how he's going to handle this, but good luck. Come behind you. he's done an incredible job. And yes, this morning, at first I thought it was a joke. I actually think it's a real app. Apple have released an app that you can have on your phone. And if you're driving or whatever, and that you see the police flagging you down, you actually just say to the app, Siri, I am being pulled over. And what Siri does is she or he, depending on what voice you've got, switches on your front facing camera and just starts recording automatically. And then once the recording is over, Siri apparently sends it to your nominated person, so the video gets sent straight to them. And Trevor was saying, number one, that's amazing, but the fact we even need to have this app in June 2020 is crazy. So your question, is it possible that there might be some retaliation? So one of the things I said to a friend yesterday, I says, look, I have no idea what was going on with those people who were found hanging from the trees, but it smacks of, don't get too uppity, don't get too above your station, because we are still here and we know where to find you. That's what it felt like to me. I'm not saying that's what was going on. Nobody's going to know. We're probably not going to get to the truth of those situations, but that's what it felt like. But the thing with the app and all the rest of it, and the fact that everything nowadays is conducted on a cell phone, my hope is that eventually that starts to get eradicated, that starts to get stamped out. Now, the problem with that is you push these things behind closed doors, and all you know is, oh, there's a woman called Sandra Bland who took her own life.
Oh my God! If you go to that, Sandra was another death that pushed me. That was, that touched me to the core of me. Still now, from time to time, I go to find her videos and I listen back to what she was saying. She used to say, no, yeah. Carry on.
So, it's that whole thing. I would like to think, and I've seen, I read a report, an interview yesterday, day before yesterday now, and it was a police officer who, because they told me, stamp out the bad apples, get rid of the bad apples, and he charted everything that happened. He reported the bad apple. He got back to the station. They basically all surrounded him and said, hey, we all stick together here. He carried on, was up for promotion. That was, of course, taken away. Wasn't moving up the ranks, was always being sidelined, was now the outsider, even within the brotherhood of the police force. And it culminated in him, his record was tarnished. Seriously, when you read it, it's painful to read. And then it's a white guy, and it says at the end, he said, trying to weed out the bad apples ruined my life and my career, and it got me nowhere. Would I do it again? Yes, I would, in a heartbeat. So, but when he explained everything that he went through to try and expose what was going on and to get rid of those bad apples, so I know that people close ranks, I know that people stick together, and I'm hoping that with the advent of the way that people are now using their technology, that this is going to be unearthed at a faster rate, and eventually you are clearing out those, and it's often only a small percentage, but as you know, if you've got a bad rotten apple and you put that into the barrel, it contaminates the whole thing. So now everybody looks bad because of one or two bad apples. But my hope is that technology will work on our side in this one. And then if the movement is still pushing forward in terms of we have had enough and it's time for a change, when those two forces come together, that's the point where you're going to see some progress being made. And for me, my perspective in the work I've done with gangs and, conflicts on the estates, what you'd call it, the projects in the United States, my secret weapon has been getting people together. I'm like, look, you know what? Give me some people in a room. I remember once I was given 4 hours to completely transform a situation where the police were at war with the gangs and the gangs were at war with the residents and total standoff, estate in London. I had 4 hours to bring these people together for the first time ever, to the point the police said, we're not coming. If we're coming, we're standing outside. The gang members were like, I don't know what you want to say. The residents were afraid to come. I'm like, look, dude. So I spoke to them all individually and says, you will come, and this is how you're going to behave. You in the room, you in the room, you in the room. And my vision for them was, at the end of that 4 hours, my vision, I said to myself, we are going to be breaking bread.
Yeah.
And I knew what that meant to me. At the end of the 4 hours, my lasting memory of that, there's a woman who is 4 foot nothing, a little white woman who lived on the estate. There's a gang member who was 6 foot something, you know, with the quintessential hoodie. She's eating, he's eating, she's looking up at him, he's looking down at her, and she says, you know, I knew your mother when she was growing up, and you've turned into such a lovely young man. I nearly burst into tears at that point. Now, this was in the days before cell phones and all the rest of it, but I call it a Kodak moment. And I'm like, if that can happen after goodness knows how long that estate had been at war, it can happen in 4 hours, to the point they are eating together. And then it wasn't just a day. After that little short half a day, they went on, the residents and the gang members, they worked together to transform the estate and clean it up. And all of them said, what skills have we got? One, because I made them do some exercises together, you know, work in collaboration. And they came up with these lists. And one of the things I said, you know, what skills have you guys got? What can you all do? And so they all pulled together and they used their respective skills to clean up their estate. So that is one of the reasons I remain hopeful, that when you can get people together and take the heat out of the situation, oh my goodness, anything is possible, I believe.
To conclude, would you like to share, I would like you to share, how has racism affected you personally, affected your personal life? Or professional life? Have you had any life-changing experience from racism?
Where do we begin? How long have we got? Okay, so there's a couple that, one of them was what I call one of those pivotal moments in authentic leadership. You might call it the crucible moment. And it was my first assignment as a management consultant, where I've been let out on my own. So I've been speaking to someone about going in and doing some executive coaching, some leadership development training, and facilitating what you call an away day, where you get a team, you take them off site, and you do some stuff and get them to all bond. So we've spoken on the phone several times. I arrive at HM Treasury Department on Horse Guards Road in central London. And I'm sitting in reception. Now, it's a highly secure building, so you don't just wander in. Somebody has to come and collect you. So I'm sitting in reception. I'm suited and booted. Trust me, I was dressed to the nines. Designer suit, Prada shoes, £375 attaché case. I'm good. I look the part. So I'm sat in reception. I'm waiting. And you know, people come and go, and they come and they collect their guests, and they take them in, and they take them through security, and they go upstairs. Great. And I'm just sitting, and I just happened to notice a guy, and he spoke to a woman over there, and he spoke to a woman over there, and he spoke to a woman over there, and he spoke to a woman over there. There's about 5 or 6 women in the reception. I was the only black woman, however. So he spoke to all of the women, and then he turned, without speaking to me, he turned to walk away. And at that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I think he's looking for me. So I call his name out loud. He turns around, looks in the direction of where he thinks the sound has come from. And I said, oh, are you da-da-da-da-da? And he went, yes. And I said, I'm Marilyn Devonish, the management consultant we've spoken on the phone. You could see the look of horror on his face, because I know and he knows what's just happened there. It didn't even occur to him for a moment that the black woman would be the management consultant and the Prince 2 project manager that was coming in. So now I'm in a spin, a bit like you're saying, you felt the emotions of these things. And at the time I was there, Treasury had a glass elevator. So we go through security, the lift door opens, I walk in first and then stand behind him, and he presses the button to where we're going. Now I'm in the back of the elevator, I'm standing behind him. What in my head is like, and at that point, the Deputy Prime Minister walked past me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? Black girl with dreadlocks from South London. I'm out of my league and out of my depth. Oh my God, I can't do it. Now, I've got a part of me that is called my other brain. My other brain stepped in and went, hold on there a minute. Yeah, he might have gone to Eton, Cambridge, whatever. He probably knows more about you than in terms of economic policy. However, He has invited you here because you have a skill that he doesn't have. He has a dysfunctional team. You know how to work with dysfunctional teams and change and transform them in a matter of hours. So let's just get this clear. You are not just going to do an okay job, you are going to do a damn fine job, such that by the time you're finished, everyone will be saying, that was amazing, when is she coming back? So by the time the elevator gets to the top of the thing now, I walk out across that fresh, I'm a completely different person. I'm like, come on, game on. But it could have so easily gone the other way. If I had not done personal development at that point, because this was in 2003, around probably summer 2003, and I started personal development in the year 2000. Had I not done that, I suspect what could have happened is I would have gone into that, meet the team, I'd be all timid and the self-doubt would have taken me over. I might have even said, I can't do this, I'm going to have to resign. So it can go one of two ways. And I think one of the worst ones, when I tell people about it, was in the early days of Skype. I'd been brought in as a project lead and the main coordinator of this project. And Skype was very new back then. So the meeting had finished. I got up and I walked out of the room because they initiated the call. So I imagine they would do whatever they do to end it. As I was walking back in, I realized the Skype was still open and I could hear what they were saying about me. I don't swear, so I can't tell you exactly what they said, but let me just tell you, it was not pleasant. Why is she here? Who the bleep is she? What the bleep does she think she knows? Why should I report to her? I want to report to the top guy. I don't want to have to go through his bleep. I had to sit and work with those people, and I did for 2 years. And then, a little bit of a gap, and I worked with them for another 2 or 3 years. To this day, they've got no idea I heard that conversation. And again, if I wasn't solid within myself, that would have broken me and made, and then it would have been awful. So my other brain steps in and goes, okay, you know the score, keep tabs of everything and do what you always do, is have a clear audit trail. So if they try to pull any stunts to undermine you and to sabotage you, because that's what they were going to do. They're going to try and sabotage me, work against me, not give me the information that I need, and then make me look stupid in the meetings. I'm like, again, we're back to that thing. I knew that in that moment I had to be ahead of the game to make sure they couldn't catch me out. So those are just 2 examples. I could give you loads more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a lovely time speaking with you. And in fact, I can chat with you on and on and on, because you just know the whole thing. And that brings us to the end of today's show on Tough Talk, where we discuss the tough topics nobody wants to talk about. On here on C-Hub Magazine, myself, Faustina Anyanwu. And that is it. If you have any idea that you think is that touches things that people don't want to talk about, then let's talk about it here, enlightening people all around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.